the Philalethes Society and the Quater Coronati Correspondence Circle, as well as a board member of the Masonic Society and the Masonic Restoration Foundation. Professionally, Andrew is an international political consultant, having taken part in campaigns and projects on 4 continents. He resides with his wife Deborah in Alexandria, Virginia. Allow me to quote one of the praises for the book Observing the Craft by Most Worshipful Brother Jim Tressner, Grand Orator of the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, Director of the Masonic Leadership Institute, and Book Review Editor of the Scottish Rite Journal. And I quote, "If blessed are the peacemakers, there is surely also a blessing for those who nudge us out of our zone of comfort and encourage us to think and re-evaluate. Such a one is Worshipful Brother Hammer. This book is edgy in some ways, controversial in others, but no one can doubt the pure and bright sincerity which shines through its pages. It is well written, thoughtful, and even genteel in its tone. Above all, it fulfills the highest challenge of a book. It makes you ponder." End quote. And from Sean Eyre, editor, Philalethes, the Journal of Masonic Research and Letters, and I quote, "At a time when Freemasons are clamoring for education and quality events, Observing the Craft is an ideal sourcebook for lodge leaders who desire to realize positive and lasting change." Andrew also recently delivered a paper at the 4th Annual International Conference on the History of Freemasonry in Edinburgh, Scotland, the conference that our Grand Lodge will be sponsoring in St. Catharines in 2015. I am sure that those of you who were able to attend Andrew's seminar yesterday enjoyed it immensely. Some of you may have been fortunate enough earlier today to get a copy of the book autographed by Andrew himself. Brethren, ladies, please welcome to the lectern Worshipful Brother Andrew Hammer.
Good evening, brethren. Grand Master, Most Worshipful Brethren, Right Worshipful Brethren, Worshipful Brethren, Brethren all. I wish to express to you my sincere and heartfelt thanks to your Grand Master for honouring me with this invitation that he was so kind to extend. We have had a wonderful 3 days here, and I'm very pleased indeed to share your Grand Annual communication with you. Tonight, I want to speak on the idea of Masonry and transition. There can be no doubt that our fraternity is in transition. The events of recent years have brought several changes in everything from important issues of recognition to the method by which we introduce new men to the fraternity. But rather than it being merely a transition of generations and numbers, the transition of which I'm speaking also involves the idea of what Freemasonry is and what it should be. We're in the midst of a transition of thinking about the definition of Masonry, and that transition will, in due course of time, bring us to the question of what we do as an organisation and why. Now, by my own observation, the new men who are coming to the craft today are coming to it in search of something. They're not here because their friends have done it, or their families, or because it has any sort of social cachet with the community. We're living in an age of renewed inquisitiveness, and these men find something in our historical mystique that speaks to their souls, that calls them to seek us out for our meaning and philosophy, not mummery and philanthropy. Now let me explain. The problem with mummery is obvious, because a thinking man hasn't time for such foolishness. But the philanthropy certainly is not a problem, because certainly no Mason can make an argument against that. It's such an essential part of what we do. However, we engage in philanthropy only because of the philosophical teachings of our order which compel us to do so in the first place. What I want to emphasize here is that Masonry is not simply a charity. To be honest, there are hundreds of other non-profit service organizations which do far more good, much more visibly. And if that is what one is more interested in, more than anything else, then I suggest that one simply go join those organizations. Masonry asks much more of a man than the external act of charity. It asks for an internal transformation of self that will inspire him to do such acts. So, without philanthropy, we're merely doing less in the world than our philosophy teaches. But without our philosophy, we lose our meaning. And when we lose our meaning, brethren, we lose our reason to exist. Masonry must return to meaning and philanthropy. The men knocking at the door of the craft now are telling us exactly that. And this is slowly changing the craft for the better. Now, the visibility of Freemasonry before the public eye has never been higher than it is today. But in my view, this is not necessarily cause to celebrate. Because visibility can sometimes lead to greater misunderstanding, particularly by those who see our fraternity as a curiosity to be exploited for their own whims and profits. So this question of visibility, while also being a part of this transition in the craft, is not necessarily a positive thing. Brethren, we say that we do not admit fools into our institution. Why then are some of us so interested in catering to or accommodating the opinions of fools? The unbelievable nonsense that is found now in various books, films, television shows about our craft is no different and should be of no more interest to us than other forms of nonsense that come out of Hollywood or cheap supermarket tabloids from those who talk so very much but understand so very little. I have nothing to offer in the effort to make Freemasonry better understood to the masses, to churches, to states, or to anyone else. We are free men with free minds. That is enough. And I have no desire to go out of my way to explain myself to those whose minds are captive to fear and willful ignorance. This craft does not answer to anyone but the great architect of the universe. And if it ever does seek to bow down before the concerns of hostile institutions made by men, be they secular or religious, then we cease to be who we are, and we will not deserve to call ourselves either freethinkers or Freemasons. We're taught not to suffer ourselves to engage in arguments with those who, through their ignorance, may deride us. Well, if we are to be consistent in that charge, then we must not also suffer ourselves to placate prying eyes or the mindless paranoia of Philistines. Freemasonry is older than this country, older even than the establishment of the United Kingdom from whence it came. We owe no explanations to anyone for who we are, what we do, why we do it, or how. And no one has the right to demand an explanation from us. Now, the desire on the part of some to see quantity as the measure of our success, as if we were just another membership organization tending to our members' checks, has led to what I feel is a deeply flawed practice in some corners of the craft, which strikes at the very heart of the initiatic function of our art. The proliferation of so-called one-day classes, and I want to stress, through no fault at all of the brothers who go through that way. Any man who goes through the degrees of Masonry in the way that we tell him to do is a brother Mason. So if anyone is to blame for this method, it's ourselves who offer it. But I suggest to you, brothers, that this does not equip men with the knowledge they need to be useful members of this fraternity. In the course of casual discussion, I've spoken with brethren who would pound their fists at the notion of giving anything to anyone who is in need, but yet not willing to work for it.